A small team of designers working out of a cramped apartment in San Francisco built a tool so powerful that it replaced dozens of apps for millions of users worldwide. What if I told you they almost gave up multiple times, pivoted completely, and then went on to build a $10 billion company that's reshaping how we think, work, and organize our lives? This is the story of Notion. And trust me, it's not what you think. Before we dive into how Notion conquered the productivity world, let's set the stage. It's 2012, Steve Jobs has just passed away. The iPhone is still relatively new. Most people are juggling between Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoint presentations, and a dozen other specialized tools just to get their work done. The productivity software market is dominated by Microsoft Office, a $20 billion giant that hasn't fundamentally changed in decades. Google Docs is gaining traction, but it's still just Microsoft Office in the cloud. Enter Ivan Zhao and Simon Last, two designers with a crazy idea that would eventually turn the entire productivity industry upside down. Our story begins not with Notion, but with a failure. Ivan Zhao, a former Inkling employee, had been obsessed with one question: why can't software be as flexible as Lego blocks? You see, Ivan grew up in a family of academics. His mother was a professor, his father an engineer. He watched them struggle with rigid software that forced them to think in predetermined ways. Word for writing, Excel for numbers, PowerPoint for presentations. But what if you wanted to mix and match? What if your thinking didn't fix neatly into these boxes? Ivan's first attempt was called applied invention. The idea: invent modular software components that users could combine however they wanted. Think of it as a word processor for productivity apps. But here's the thing about being ahead of your time. Sometimes you're so far ahead, nobody understands what you're building. Applied invention failed. Investors didn't get it. Users found it too complex. Ivan was running out of money, living on ramen, and seriously considering giving up on his dreams of flexible software. But then something interesting happened. Simon Last, a talented designer, saw Ivan's work and had an epiphany. The problem wasn't the vision, it was the execution. They weren't building software, they were building a new way of thinking, compartmentalized. When you're planning a project, you might need to write notes, create a timeline, track budgets, collaborate with teammates, all in one place. So they asked a different question. What if instead of building separate tools for different tasks, we built one tool that could become any tool you needed? The first version of Notion launched in 2016. The first version of Notion launched in 2016. It was rough around the edges, but it had something magical: blocks. Everything in Notion was a block: text, images, databases, code, embedded content. You could drag, drop, and rearrange these blocks however you wanted. They didn't target enterprise customers or try to replace Microsoft Office directly. Instead, they focused on individuals and small teams who were already frustrated with these existing tools. While traditional software companies were spending millions on sales teams and marketing campaigns, Notion discovered something powerful. Their users were becoming their best marketers. It started with templates. Remember, Notion's flexibility was both its strength and its weakness. New users would open Notion and think, this is amazing, but what do I do with it? So the early community started sharing templates, pre-built setups for common use cases. Each template was like a little advertisement for Notion's flexibility. But then something unexpected happened. Social media, particularly TikTok and YouTube, discovered Notion. Suddenly, Notion aesthetic became a thing. People were creating beautiful, minimalist workspace tools. Study with me videos featured perfectly organized Notion pages. Digital planning became a trend, and Notion was at the center of it. From a business analyst perspective, this was genius, though I'm not sure it was entirely intentional. Notion had accidentally tapped into something deeper than productivity. They had created a canvas for digital self expression. Using Notion wasn't just about getting work done, it was about creating a personalized digital environment that reflected your thinking style. The numbers speak for themselves. From 2019 to 2021, Notion's users base exploded from 1 million to over 20 million users. During the pandemic, when everyone was working from home and looking for better ways to organize their lives, Notion became the Swiss Army knife for productivity tools. But let's talk about what's really impressive from an engineering perspective. Building flexible software is incredibly hard. Most productivity tools are built around specific data structures, documents, spreadsheets, presentations. Notion had to create a system that could handle any type of content while being fast and reliable. They built what's essentially a real time collaborative database where every piece of content is a block and every block can contain other blocks. They built what's essentially a real time collaborative database where every piece of content is a block and every block can contain other blocks, and it all has to sync in real time across devices, handle millions of users, and stay responsive. The engineering challenges were enormous. How do you make a database that can become a document? How do you make a document that can become a website? How do you handle version controls when users are constantly reorganizing their content? Notion's solution was elegant. They created a universal content model. Every block has a type, properties, and can contain other blocks. Whether you are creating a simple node or a complex project management system, you are really just arranging these fundamental building blocks in different ways. While competitors like Airtable focused on databases and Coda focused on documents, Notion said, why choose? They built a system that could be both and more. This wasn't just feature creep, it was a fundamental reimagining of what software could be. By 2020, Notion wasn't just growing, it was disrupting entire categories of software. Personal productivity apps like Evernote saw users migrating to Notion. Project management tools like Trello found themselves competing with Notion templates. Even professional tools like Confluence and SharePoint were losing ground to Notion's simplicity and flexibility. The traditional software industry took notice. Microsoft acquired Loop, trying to create their own blog based productivity tool. Google launched Tables, attempting to bridge the gap between docs and sheets. But they were playing catch up to a company that had fundamentally rethought the problem. The market validated Notion's approach with cold hard cash. In 2021, they raised $275 million at a $10 billion valuation. For context, that's larger than many established software companies that have been around for decades. But here's what's really interesting. Notion achieved this without traditional enterprise sales. They didn't have armies of salespeople or expensive marketing campaigns. Their growth was almost entirely organic, driven by users who genuinely loved their product. But success brought new challenges. With millions of users creating increasingly complex workspaces, Notion started experiencing growing pains. Server outages became frequent. Notion had to prove they could scale their infrastructure to match their ambitions. This is where Notion's story becomes a lesson in product management. They had to balance their core premise of flexibility with the practical need for performance and reliability. It's a classic engineering problem. General purpose tools are often slower than specialized ones. Notion's response was methodical. They invested heavily in infrastructure, rebuilt core systems for better performance, and introduced features like offline access and faster loading times. They proved that they weren't just a trendy startup, they were building for the long term. In 2021, they launched their public API, essentially opening up their platform for developers. This wasn't just about adding features, it was about creating an ecosystem. Suddenly, developers could build tools that extended Notion's capabilities, website builders that turned Notion pages into websites, automation tools that connected Notion to other services, analytics dashboards that provided insights into Notion workspaces. From a strategic perspective, this was brilliant. Notion was no longer just a productivity tool, it was becoming a platform. Every third party integration made Notion more valuable to users. and every new user made the platform more attractive to developers. The community responded enthusiastically. Notion became the foundation for entire business models. Consultants specialized in setting up Notion workspaces. Template creators built followings selling up Notion setups. The tool had created its own economy. But what's next for Notion? The company has been clear about their vision. They want to build the world's most flexible productivity platform. Looking ahead, I predict we'll see Notion evolve into something more like an operating system for knowledge work. Imagine AI that can automatically organize your information, suggest connections between ideas, and even help you discover insights you didn't know you had. They have fundamentally changed how we think about productivity software. Before Notion, software told you how to work. After Notion, software adapts to how you think. This shift has influenced the entire industry. New productivity tools are being built with flexibility as the core principle. The rigid categories of document editor, spreadsheet are breaking down. We are moving towards a world where software is more like clay, moldable to fit your specific needs. Educational institutions are using Notion to create more flexible learning environments. Small businesses are building entire operations on Notion. Creative professionals are using it as both a portfolio and a business management tool. The tool has become a canvas for digital innovation. From a cultural perspective, Notion has contributed to a broader movement towards digital minimalism and intentional productivity. Instead of juggling dozens of apps, people are creating unified digital environments that reflect their personal workflows. So, what can we learn from Notion's journey? First, that sometimes the best way to compete isn't to build a better version of existing solutions, but to reimagine the problem entirely. Notion didn't just try to build a better word processor or a better spreadsheet. They asked why we needed separate tools at all. Second, in the age of social media, your users can be your best marketing team. Notion's growth was driven by people who genuinely loved the product and wanted to share that excitement with others. Third, the flexibility doesn't have to mean complexity. Notion's genius was making powerful tools feel approachable. They proved that you can build sophisticated software without sacrificing ease of use. As we look to the future, Notion's story is still being written. They are not just building productivity software, they are building the infrastructure for how we'll think and work in the digital age. With AI integration, platform expansion, and a growing ecosystem, Notion is positioned to become one of the fundamental tools of the knowledge economy. The real lesson of Notion success isn't just about building great software, it's about understanding that best tools don't just help you work better, they help you think better. And in a world where knowledge work is becoming increasingly important, that's not just valuable, it's essential.